Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for Direct Connection. Coming up tonight, powerful new evidence about the dangers of head injuries in sports. We will learn how to lower that risk. But we begin tonight with the final chapter of NASA's mission to Saturn. The flight has come to an end, but not without returning some spectacular images and data to Earth. Joining us now from the Goddard Space Flight Center is Mike Flaser, principal investigator of the Composite Infrared Spectrometer on the Cassini orbiter. Mike, thanks for being with us, and congratulations on a mission accomplished.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. It was a wonderful experience, and it was fabulous. You
were out at JPL over the last few days for the end of the mission. What was that like?
Well, it was two things. One was, it was sort of a bittersweet moment for a lot of us because we had this wonderful spacecraft that we had gotten used to over the years and did such wonderful things, brought back so much great data and discoveries in the Saturnian system. And then all of a sudden, our friend was going away. We had to send it away, actually, because it had run out of fuel. And we needed to dispose of it so it didn't crash onto another satellite. Because NASA will follow up with missions looking for life, and we wanted to make sure it wasn't life that we had sent up with Cassini.
You told me before the show this was one of the most spectacular, maybe the most spectacular planetary missions in NASA's history. Why so?
Well, first and foremost is its longevity. We were selected the experiments were selected 27 years ago, 1990. And a lot of us have gotten much older since then, but we had time. We've been in orbit around Saturn for 13 years. It took that long to build the instruments, launch a spacecraft, and get out to Saturn. And we just had time to not only map out the details on Saturn and its moons and its rings, its exquisite rings, but we had time to see how things evolve. And we have a tough time predicting how things evolve in these complex geophysical systems. They aren't easy to predict. I mean, just think about the hurricanes we just had on a couple weeks ago in Florida and Texas, and the forecasters were having a tough time predicting it because of the complexity of the atmospheres.
Mike, we've been looking. We've been looking at some pictures of Saturn and the rings, but the most interesting part for me, anyway, and you can tell me from a scientific perspective, has been the moons. There are dozens of them, but one in particular called Enceladus, I think, that looks like an iceberg. A round iceberg from space, but your instrument says there's something else going on there. Right.
We were surprised to see at the South Pole that first of all, the Composite Infrared Spectrometer, which we call SEERS, measures heat radiation. So, it could take a spectrum of your hand and give you, tell you what molecules were being emitted from your hand and what the temperature of your hand was. Well, we do that with anybody we look at, and what we saw on Enceladus in the South Polar region was it was pretty warm. And then we localized it. There are little fractures at the South Pole, and this warmth was coming from those fractures and meant that heat was coming out from inside of Enceladus, and we hadn't expected that at all.
So we're seeing now the picture of Enceladus. It's sort of backlit by the sun, and it looks like Old Faithful erupting, and you all think there's water coming out. Does the whole mission make scientists think that life is more likely or less likely there than initially thought?
Well, people people, when they're searching for life, always look for water because life on Earth is based, you need water for that sort of thing. And so, the theme is follow the water, and you have a better chance of finding life. And Enceladus is, there is evidence that there's a subsurface ocean or sea on Enceladus, and it's going to be warm. Those jets that you're talking about in the picture are consistent with the warm temperatures we see. There's sort of geysers gushing out, and we're seeing the heat with the Sears instrument, and the other instruments on Cassini are seeing, what the composition of these eruptions are. And there's water and there's other volatiles too.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question about this mission or space science, you can give us a call. We'll have the number up on the screen. You can also tweet your questions. The Twitter address is @MPT News. Let's start with a call in Baltimore County. This is Paul. Paul, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mike. I have a question about propulsion. I know, unfortunately, that these voyages take a number of decades. I believe that Cassini entered Saturn's atmosphere at about 75,000 miles an hour. But years ago, we had a Helios sun probe reach 150,000 miles an hour. Do you know if there are any really distinct plans about investing in advanced physics propulsion for higher speeds?
Oh, wow. I'm probably not the person to ask. There's, this Cassini was a chemical propulsion thing, and to be launched that way. And there has been talk about ion engines and such, but I'm not really that familiar with those concepts. In order to get out to Saturn, it took a long time, but what we did is, it reads like the Odyssey. I mean, basically, we had to use the inner planets to propel ourselves, to give us the push to get out to Jupiter, which gave us another push, and then finally we made it out to Saturn. So these missions do take a long time to, get to your target.
Let's talk to Patty in Anne Arundel County. Patty, thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. My question is, I've heard that Cassini was running out of fuel, and that's why it had to be crashed into Saturn. But what kind of fuel was it running on?
Thanks very much.
It's nitrous oxide, which is N2O2 for the oxidizer, and it's some complicated form of hydrazine. They combine the two, and that's the fuel. I don't remember the chemical name anymore, but it's some kind of hydrazine.
I did read
compound.
that the decision to burn it up, vaporize it on Saturn, there weren't too many other options. Could have been parked in an orbit for a long period of time, yes, or crashed into one of the moons. But there was thought that was a greater risk of potentially contaminating a place that someday might be found to have life.
Yeah, we didn't want to leave something analogous to space junk orbiting far from Saturn. And the other side of the coin was there were advantages for being daring and getting in close, which is what we had to do to set up this crashing into Saturn's atmosphere, because we had never been inside Saturn's rings, between Saturn and its rings, on a regular basis, and that was a part of the atmosphere we wanted to sample. Earlier in the mission, we were hesitant to do that because we didn't want to have a rock hit us at the beginning of the mission and have an early end of the mission. But at this point, we were running out of fuel. We said, let's go for it. And so we did 22 orbits inside of Saturn's rings before Saturn's giant moon Titan gave it a little gravitational tweak to send it right into the atmosphere. And that was great because the close-in data looks very promising to us.
Phone call from Fairfax County. This is Alan. Alan, thank you for the call. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is about the temperature that this gentleman was talking about a little while ago at the plumes at the South Pole, how warm the temperature is. So I'm wondering what the actual temperature is we're talking about compared to how warm things are here on Earth with the sun being so close to us.
It's a great question.
How different is the temperature there?
Thank you very much. What did we learn, Mike?
Well, typically in the normal regions of, if it was just solar heating, it would be only like less than 50 degrees Kelvin or something, the order of 50 degrees Kelvin or something. But in these cracks, these fissures at the South Pole, we see temperatures that are much higher. And I think the highest we've seen is something like 180 Kelvin. But the problem is that the Sears detectors are bigger than the cracks. You know, the field of view is bigger than the cracks, so we're averaging. And we expect, since there's stuff gushing out, that we must be reaching temperatures close to the melting point of water, which is 273 degrees Kelvin or 0 Celsius. So that's what we expect. That it's pretty hot just below the surface.
Mike, I'm curious about your career experiences with this stuff, the long time frames of sending a probe across the solar system and running it for a while. When this was designed, everybody was using Windows 95. And you know, I'm wondering if you wish there could have been some in-flight technology upgrades.
Well, as far as the hardware goes, once it's there, unless you plan on sending somebody out with a bus of equipment to load onto it, you just can't do that. It's always true of these missions. The centers like JPL have been very adept at keeping up with software upgrades and also making the most of what we have, and it's just a fact of life. There's a big push now for miniaturization. I mean, Cassini is the size of a school bus, and so which is wonderful. But you have to get all that up to your target, which in this case was Saturn, and it adds to the expense and everything else. And so you would like to have more compact spacecraft do the same thing. And the electronics boxes for all the instruments on board are a big part of the weight that these instruments have. So if you can get that down, that's a step in the right direction.
Mike, before we go, we're looking at that Pac-Man image. So this is another moon called Mimas, another moon of Saturn on the left,
right,
in black and white. Looks a little like the Death Star from Star Wars. On the right is a false color image showing infrared, and it's a weird pattern. Do you know what that's about?
It's the difference in the properties of what I'll call the soil on the surface. Pac-Man you're seeing an afternoon image. It's very bright, and that part of the thing, of Pac-Man itself, is material like desert sand. It's analogous to that. It has extremes in temperatures. It gets very hot during the day, very cold at night. Where the crater is, that it looks like it's going to gobble up, that's like ice. It conducts heat better from the sun or into the interior. And so it's not like sand, it's like a solid cube of ice, and it has very small temperature variations. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing this sand-like thing trying to eat up this ice cube, and what causes that is electrons bombardment as Enceladus orbits Saturn. Electrons impact it, and where the electron impact is greater, they tend to fuse the soil particles so that they become better conductors. Desert sand is a lousy conductor. There's a lot of air spaces in between the sand particles, but ice is very good because it's fused, and that's basically the difference you see.
Fascinating stuff. Mike Flaser and his colleagues at Goddard helped to send that school bus all the way across the solar system. Fascinating work. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
My pleasure, Jeff.
And coming up tonight, new efforts to prevent sports-related concussions. We'll be right back.
Got an unused vehicle going nowhere? Donate it to the one place that can take you any place. Visit mpt.org/vehicles and support the programs you love on MPT.
The MPT app puts our programs right at your fingertips, so you can choose when to watch, what to watch, wherever you want to watch it. Download it now.
What happens in Japan and Asia matters to me. And with NHK World's newsroom in Tokyo, I get the news live from Japan right at the start of my day.
New ideas come out of Asia all the time. NHK Newsline reports on business, technology, and world events from Tokyo to Bangkok.
Once in the morning gives me a heads up on the competition.
Every hour on the hour, the news I want from Asia.
Watch NHK World now on Comcast Channel 268 and Verizon Channel 480.
Are you turning 70 and a half this year? If so, you generally have to start spending down your retirement account. Even the minimum distribution can place you in a sticky situation. Luckily, you can now use your IRA to make tax-free gifts. Gifts up to $100,000 will never count as income, but always make a difference. That's icing on the cake.
Make your gift for this year before December 31st. Visit mpt.org/support.
And joining us for this week's Your Health segment is Dr. Eugenio Rocksmith, Assistant Professor of Neurology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine and a neurologist at the University of Maryland Rehabilitation and Orthopedic Institute. Doctor, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
There's been some new research into sports-related, really football-related brain injuries. What's been learned?
Well, in July of this year, an article came out in the journal JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, which is a very well-respected journal, and they basically looked at pathological samples of the brains of 202 football players. The majority of the brains had been donated by professional football players, but there were also brains from people who had played football in college, in the Canadian Football League, semi-pro, even some high school and pre-high school players.
And they identified something called CTE?
Yes. It's the name of the disorder is called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And in this study, which of course is a study based on or done on brains that have been donated by players who have died and their families have donated the brains to this institute. And they did a microscopic study of the brains, and they found that there were certain abnormalities that were very common in the brains of these football players, especially the longer they played, the more likely they were to have these abnormalities called tau. And an accumulation of these abnormalities in different parts of the brain resulted in certain symptoms that could be diagnosed as this chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
But what would it do to someone while they were living? What symptoms would you expect?
While they're living, it can cause many different behavioral problems and cognitive problems. Behavioral, like, for example, explosive anger or anxiety, or even physical and verbal abuse, people losing their temper very easily. It can also, the more serious symptoms can cause memory problems, cognitive problems in general, and some players even went on to have motor problems in walking very slowly or very slow movements, or problems with maintaining balance while they're walking.
If you post-mortem examine the brains of a bunch of people who were not football players, would you see any cases of CTE?
You probably would, because throughout a person's lifetime, they have taken, a few or even maybe more hits to the head, and that may cause some very minuscule damage on pathologic examination. But what's significant about CTE is that with these football players, they have repeatedly taken blows to their bodies and especially to their heads, affecting their brains. And it's the accumulation of those blows over time that eventually leads to this degeneration of the brain.
How does it relate to concussions? Are they the type of forceful injury that can cumulatively cause CTE? does it necessarily cause somebody to have a concussion and have symptoms immediately afterwards?
Well, you can have symptoms. Very often, football players will talk about how they took a hit on the field and they were a little groggy after the hit, and they would go sit down for a while and just kind of shake it off and then try to go back in to play the game. And that's specifically why there have been these guidelines that have come around about return to play after taking a hit in football. And so these players may have very transient symptoms of memory problems or behavioral problems that may last for a few hours to a few days to some even a few weeks. For example, in my brain injury clinic at University of Maryland Rehab and Orthopedic Institute, I very frequently see concussion patients, and they've sustained concussions from many different causes, also from playing sports.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question about brain injuries from sports or otherwise, give us a call. We'll have the number up on the screen. You could also tweet your questions to @MPTNews. So what is the treatment? What's available?
There really is no treatment for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. The best treatment is just prevention. Prevention in the sense that you have to make a really conscious decision as a parent as to when you're going to allow your child to play football, if that's what they want to do. Conscious decision as to how intense the level of play you want your child to be involved in, because this is something that really can start in early childhood, depending on when the child starts to play football. And as they progressively grow up and play more and more games, and the intensity rises, that accumulation of these abnormal tau proteins becomes more significant, and eventually will lead to symptoms down the road in their later lives.
What would you advise a parent on the question of if they're inclined to have somebody in a contact sport like football, when would they start? And second part, soccer, heading the ball, and even without heading the ball, there are sometimes violent collisions.
Soccer is another sport, and even though by definition it's not supposed to be a contact sport, there's no way that you can avoid not colliding with other players. I played soccer when I was in high school, and that was very common. So yes, that is another type of sport where you can have a significant injury to the brain, especially if the players are involved in heading the ball. That's a big issue. But as far as football is concerned, I think the jury is still out on when is the appropriate time when it's safer to allow your child to play football. We still need to do a lot more research as to how this disease process begins, because we have to keep in mind that this study that was mentioned, or that was displayed in JAMA, had to do with players who had already, or former players who had already started showing symptoms that were somewhat unusual, and their families were concerned about it. So after the players died, their brains were donated to this pool of brains. But the thing is that you have to remember is that there's somewhat of a bias in that those brains were already from players who are starting to show symptoms, so they're more likely to have CTE.
Let's take a phone call. St. Mary's County, this is Marilyn. Marilyn, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Yes, isn't tau the same protein that's in Alzheimer's brains?
In Alzheimer's?
Yes, isn't it?
Yes, that's one of the abnormalities that you can find in people who have Alzheimer's, yes.
I find myself, I watched a fair amount of football this weekend, and you start to feel guilty about it. And certainly, I mean, it's huge money, the TV, the ratings, and the other revenue streams that they have. So there's a lot of money riding on making it safer. Is there a safer helmet? I've seen some reports recently, in fact, about making the outer shell a little bit flexible, trying to reduce the torsional forces as well.
Right. One helmet that I'm aware of is called the VICIS. It's VICIS, and it's zero. The name of the helmet is a 01 helmet, and basically it has an outer shell that's kind of like the crumple zone on the bumper of a car. The greater the impact, the more the outer shell will deform to absorb the impact. It also has an inner lining that helps to disperse the force that has been directed at that particular spot, disperse it omnidirectionally everywhere around the brain or everywhere around the head, so that there's no one area where that takes a significant amount of force.
Let's squeeze in one more call. Prince George's County, this is Charles. Charles, go ahead.
How you guys doing?
Good, thanks for the call.
Yeah, here's the question I have for the doc. Doesn't have to do with sports, but when I was younger, I'd had encephalitis when I was around 2, and it had paralyzed me from the neck down, but I can walk now. I was wondering if having that kind of brain problem, if that would cause me problems later on in life. And I'll listen to you over the television.
We'll get you an answer. Best of luck. Thank you. Off topic, but what do you think?
I do think that anytime you have any type of insult to the brain, whether it be traumatic or infectious, as in his case, there is some lasting damage that will persist throughout the person's life. Now, in his particular case, once the disease process has been arrested, there should be some recovery after that. But in the case of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, this type of damage just continues to progressively worsen and worsen, and the patient's symptoms worsen.
I just have a couple seconds. If somebody's out there, they have maybe a student playing football, have some symptoms, who do they see? Primary care or to a specialist neurologist?
Usually the players will see their primary care physician first, and then the primary care physician should refer the student to
Doctor, we have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thanks so much. Thank you for watching Direct Connection, and have a good night.
Your health segments are a co-production of Maryland Public Television and the University of Maryland Medical System.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.